She left without goodbye, just a note beside his coffee mug. Thank you for letting me survive. No promises, no tears, just silence, and a trail that faded at the edge of Wildflower Hollow. But Reed followed. He found her at the creek, where the mountains swallowed sound and time stood still. And from his coat, he pulled something small, frayed, delicate, her mother's handkerchief. She thought it was lost in the fire, but he'd kept it. He didn't beg, didn't plead. He just looked at her and said, "You belonged here the moment you stood your ground. No chains, no claims, just choice." And for the first time, Clara didn't run. She stayed. Because sometimes, home isn't where you're kept. It's where someone waits beside you. The smell of burning wheat never left her, not even now. Years later, as Clara Vale stood in the center of Red Hollow's saloon, wrists bound and dust caking her boots, she could still taste the smoke from that night. The night everything changed. She had been 8, hiding beneath the floorboards while her parents screamed above her. The voices had been men's, sharp with hunger and cruelty. They asked for water, then took everything else. She hadn't made a sound, just gripped her mother's embroidered handkerchief and bit down hard on her knuckles until blood mixed with splinters. By morning, she was the only one left breathing. They said a stable hand found her 3 days later. Mistook her for a boy. Didn't matter. She never corrected anyone again. It was safer that way. They passed her from ranch to ranch like a stray dog no one wanted to shoot, but no one wanted to feed. By 12, she was breaking colts and hauling hay. By 15, she could outcuss a drunk and outpunch most of them too. She earned her survival by keeping people just scared enough not to touch her. But here, under the yellow-stained lamplight of Red Hollow's saloon, that armor cracked just a little. Hank McCord shoved her forward, laughter thick in his throat. She don't cook, don't curtsy, called me a sorry excuse for a man in front of my own boys. He turned to the crowd like he was presenting livestock. Anyone want to take a crack at taming this wild filly? Go ahead. I'm selling sheep. The room laughed. Crude voices threw suggestions, bets, and jeers. Clara didn't flinch. Her chin stayed high, eyes locked on nothing in particular. Inside, a song echoed faintly. Her mother's voice, humming that lullaby about bluebells and brave girls. Her lip bled, but she refused to wipe it. She would not bow. In the shadowed corner of the saloon, Reed Mercer sat with his cane resting against the bench. He said nothing, moved even less. But he watched. Not like the others. Not with appetite or scorn. Just steady, unreadable interest. He'd seen her once before, though she never noticed. 2 weeks earlier, she'd been in the stables behind the Cooper place, brushing a nervous mare. She hadn't known anyone was near. Reed had come for a broken bridle but stayed for a moment longer than he meant to. Something in her posture had caught him, like a storm holding still. Not fearful, not tamed, just tired of being chased. And now, as the saloon roared around her, Reed saw it again, that same defiance beneath the dirt and bruises. He didn't know her name, didn't need to. All he knew was this. She hadn't broken then, and she wasn't breaking now. Whisper Creek Ranch didn't whisper much anymore. The wind whistled through cracked boards and broken shutters, but it wasn't gentle. It groaned like a tired old man leaning on splintered bones. The barn leaned hard to the left, its roof patched with mismatched shingles. Fences sagged. The corral gates hung by rusted hinges. The creek still ran, but shallow, more memory than promise. Reed Mercer stood at the edge of his porch, cane in one hand, tin coffee cup in the other. He watched the horizon like a man waiting for something he didn't believe would come. When he bought the land 10 years ago, it was meant to be a home for his brother too. Nathaniel had been the dreamer, the one who thought they'd turn the old homestead into a proper school one day, a place where ranch kids could learn their letters between branding and feeding stock. But the flood had taken Nathan first. The accident took Reed's leg after. Now the dream lay buried beneath both. He still kept a room filled with books, pages curling from heat and age, but no one turned them anymore. The livestock had dwindled to a dozen head of cattle and 2 half-wild mares. Every season, something broke. Fence posts, wagon wheels, his own resolve. But Reed didn't leave. Couldn't. The land was stitched into his bones like regret. And now, this girl. Clara Vale had said maybe 4 words since they'd left Red Hollow. She hadn't asked where they were going, hadn't thanked him, just sat beside him in the wagon, jaw tight, arms crossed, eyes fixed far beyond the trail. When they arrived, she hadn't unpacked, hadn't changed clothes. She refused the hand he offered down from the wagon bed, walked instead to the loft, climbed the ladder like it might collapse beneath her, and didn't come down until the next morning. She ate standing, drank coffee in silence, slept in her boots. She wasn't scared. She was ready to leave, to fight, to vanish. And Reed didn't push. On the third morning, just as the sun split the sky in soft gold, he stepped onto the porch and noticed the bay mare missing from the corral. And Clara was gone. His heart didn't race. His breath didn't catch. He just sighed. By mid-morning, he found her. High up on the ridge behind the north pasture, Clara sat astride the mare like she was born to it, one hand resting on the saddle horn, the other shading her eyes as she scanned the wide-open land. The wind played with her hair, tugging loose strands from the braids she barely managed that morning. She didn't look back when he approached. "You running?" he asked. Her voice was steady, quiet. "I needed air." Reed nodded once. His grip tightened slightly on the head of his cane. "You're not chained here," he said. "But if you're going to go, run right. Don't drift halfway. That kind of half-leaving, it'll kill slower than a bullet." Clara turned then, met his eyes for the first time that day. "And if I stay?" Reed looked out over the hills, jaw set. "Then pull your weight." "No more. No less." She gave a single nod, then nudged the mare into a slow descent back toward the ranch. That night they shared a meal, bacon and cornbread, coffee hot enough to scald. The table between them felt too wide, the room too quiet, but no one filled it with nonsense. Clara ate with her eyes on her plate. Reed watched the fire crackle in the hearth. When she stood to wash the dishes, he spoke without looking up. "You ride like you were born in the saddle." She paused, hands in the wash basin. "I was," she said softly. "Not that it helped much." He nodded once, then added, "The mare likes you. She don't like anyone." "I don't like anyone either." For the first time in months, Reed smiled, just barely. But it was real. And across the room, Clara's shoulders loosened, by an inch, maybe 2. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't trust. But it was something. A flicker in the dry grass. A spark, waiting. Clara never asked what needed fixing. She just noticed. By the end of her first full week, the porch no longer groaned underfoot. The warped planks had been reset, sanded smooth where bare feet might tread. A split fence post near the lower field now stood straight, wrapped tight in wire. Saddles glistened with fresh oil. The stove never went cold. And every morning before dawn, the smell of brewing coffee filled the house before Reed had taken his first step from bed. She didn't do it for thanks, didn't speak a word about the tasks, just moved through the day with quiet hands and eyes that rarely rested. She worked like she was trying to outrun stillness. One morning, Reed stepped onto the porch to find a pair of worn leather gloves waiting on the railing. Small, sun-softened, broken in at the seams. Clara looked up from where she was splitting kindling and raised a brow. He only said, "Work like you belong here." She didn't smile, but she took the gloves. A few days later, the widow Mabel Croft rode up from the south edge of the county, breathless and cursing under her bonnet. Her prize heifer was calving early, and the ranch hand meant to help was off chasing some girl in town. Reed moved to fetch his coat, but Clara was already swinging into the saddle. She returned hours later, sleeves soaked, hair matted with sweat and dust. But the calf was alive, and so was Mabel's respect. By sundown, word had spread across 3 neighboring spreads. The wild girl at Whisper Creek had calmed a storm-born calf like she was born from soil herself. Clara said nothing of it. But when Reed handed her a tin of balm for her cracked hands that evening, she took it without argument. It was the 3rd week when Clara found the girl in the barn. It was near midnight and the horses were restless. Clara went to check the stall latches and caught movement, a rustle behind the hay. At first, she thought it was a coyote. Then she heard a muffled sniff. She pulled back the tarp and found a girl. Couldn't be more than 13, curled in a nest of feed sacks. Dirt smudged her face, one eye swollen dark. She flinched before Clara even spoke. The girl gave her name in a whisper. June Harper. Said she'd run from her stepfather's fists 3 nights ago. No food, no plan, just the direction her feet carried her. Clara didn't hesitate. She brought the girl inside. When Reed came down the stairs and saw her seated by the fire, wrapped in his old wool coat, his face hardened. Clara, that's not our business. She's bleeding from her ribs. She's someone else's daughter. She's no one's daughter, just like I was. Reed's jaw worked. We can't afford scandal. The town. Clara stood, eyes dark and fierce. No one saved me, she said. I won't be the woman who turns away from someone I understand too well. The silence that followed was long and sharp, but Reed didn't argue again. That night he nailed a few boards together, dragged up an extra mattress, and built June a small cot in the loft. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came with a man in a gray suit and polished boots. Silas Langford looked as out of place at Whisper Creek as a rattlesnake in a baptism. His coat was clean despite the dust. His smile never touched his eyes. And his satchel, leather, oiled and finely stitched, swung from his hand like it held more power than a sheriff's badge. Reed was chopping wood by the barn when he saw the rider on the hill. By the time Langford dismounted, Reed was leaning on his cane near the porch, sweat streaking his temple, jaw set like stone. You Mercer? Langford asked, voice slick as creek ice. Reed didn't answer, just nodded once. Silas Langford, first land and title out of Cheyenne. Routine document review. He produced a folded paper from his satchel, tapped it lightly. Seems there's an inconsistency with your deed. Clara stepped onto the porch before Reed could reply. She'd been sweeping the entry and heard every word. She said nothing at first, just wiped her hands on her apron and narrowed her eyes. Langford saw her and smiled too broadly. Ah, the help. Clara descended the steps slowly, hand outstretched. May I see that document? Langford blinked, then chuckled. I assure you, miss, this is legal business. I can read. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. Langford hesitated, then perhaps thinking it amusing, handed her the deed. She opened it carefully, brows knitting as her eyes scanned the text. It took her less than a minute. This clause right here, she said, tapping the bottom of the page. It's a forfeiture trigger. If Reed signs anything further without legal representation, the property defaults to collateral. And you claim there's an unpaid debt, but there's no record of any such loan. Langford's smile thinned. That's standard. No, it's not, Clara cut in. First Land and Title changed their header format 3 years ago. Yours is the old one. And the wording here? It's not even close to their updated legal boilerplate. She folded the document cleanly and handed it back. You're not with the bank. You're a drifter with a printer and a good hat. You prey on men too proud to ask questions. Langford's jaw twitched. You might want to ride out, Clara said calmly, before someone less polite reads this paper next. Langford looked between them, Reed silent and steady, Clara unmoved. He scoffed, yanked the deed from her hand, and stuffed it in his satchel. You'll regret this, he muttered. We already regret the dust you kicked up, Clara replied. He rode out, his stallion casting mud and fury behind him. For a long time after, Reed said nothing, just stood there, staring at where the man had vanished over the ridge. That evening, after the chores and the silence, Clara came into the house and found Reed seated at the kitchen table. A leather-bound notebook lay open in front of him, the pages curled slightly at the edges, smudged with graphite and time. She could see the shapes of lines, poems maybe, words strung together like fence wire over wounds. I wanted to teach, Reed said, not looking up. Before the flood, before the accident, I was going to build a schoolhouse right here. My brother had the land. I had the books. He turned a page slowly. Then life took one thing, then another, until I forgot how to want anything else. Clara stepped closer. Her eyes traced the faint, looping cursive on the page. She didn't ask for permission. She just picked up the notebook and read aloud. Where the hills forget the names we gave them, and silence does not mean alone. I'll build a home from ruin and rope, if only to prove I've grown. Her voice was low, not polished, but honest. When she finished, she didn't look at him, just closed the book gently and set it down. Reed exhaled slowly. They didn't touch. But the space between them no longer felt hollow. It felt full of something not yet named. By midsummer, Clara Vale didn't just work the ranch, she ran it. She knew which feed supplier shorted sacks by weight, which gate hinge groaned before it snapped, and which of Reed's horses were lying about their limp. She scrawled numbers in the ledger like she was born for arithmetic, barked orders at the new hands without apology, and patched the water tank twice with nothing but pitch and resolve. Even the locals started to take notice. At McAllister's general store, men who once scoffed now tipped their hats. "Miss Vale," they'd say, some with respect, some with fear. Either way, she answered only when she felt like it. When a merchant tried to overcharge her for nails, she laid down the correct total without blinking. When the farrier made a crude remark, she told him flatly, "If you speak like that again, I'll break your jaw before Reed gets the chance." He apologized, twice. Reed watched all of this quietly. One evening, as the sun melted behind the ridge and the sky burned peach and lavender, he carried something out to the barn, wrapped in a tattered canvas, awkward in shape. Clara was brushing down a restless gelding when he set the bundle down with a grunt. "What's that?" she asked. He didn't answer, just unwrapped it. It was a saddle, new but not store-bought. The leather was hand-tooled, the stitching careful if not perfect. A carved V was worked into the flank strap, and small daisies, barely visible, lined the horn. Clara blinked. "You made this?" "Took me the last few weeks. Nights mostly." She traced the curve of the pommel, fingers light. "I thought maybe—" He hesitated. "Belonging ain't just about staying, Clara. It's about being seen." She didn't answer right away, just looked at the saddle like it was more fragile than it appeared. Then she said, soft but steady, "It's beautiful. Shireen." That night, the wind came hard off the northern hills, and the sky split open like it had been waiting too long. Lightning struck just past midnight. Clara woke to the smell of smoke and Reed yelling from the yard. The barn was aflame, red and vicious, climbing fast through dry hay and old wood. They didn't hesitate. She dragged the bridle off the wall and ran into the heat. He limped behind her, dragging buckets and curses. Together they freed the horses, pulled tack from the smoke, and beat back the flames with whatever they could. By dawn, the roof was gone. The east wall collapsed. The rain came late, soaking ashes and soaking them. They sat under the eaves of the house, covered in soot and silence, watching steam rise from what was once the barn. Reed didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small parcel wrapped in linen, smudged, soft from years of being handled. He offered it without ceremony. Clara opened it gently. Inside was a cedar box, no larger than a book. She unlatched it. Dozens of small paper packets lay within, each labeled in faded pencil. Lavender, marigold, forget-me-not. "My mother's," Reed said. "She saved seeds every spring. Said she'd plant them when the house felt right." Clara ran her thumb over the edges of the packets. One corner was stained with oil. Another was creased like someone had folded it in a rush. "Why give them to me?" Reed looked straight ahead, his voice soft but sure. "Because I think you found the right soil." Clara stared at the box for a long moment. The barn still smoldered. Her palms were burned, her boots soaked. And yet, she didn't cry. She just nodded, clutched the box to her chest, and whispered, "I'll plant them tomorrow." By early fall, the ranch no longer limped through the seasons. It breathed. Fences stood straight. The barn had a new roof, hammered in by neighbors who once whispered, now tipping their hats to Clara Vale like she'd always belonged. Chickens wandered the yard. 2 calves had been born in the same week. June Harper, her bruises long faded, rode to school every morning with a braid Clara taught her to tie and a book tucked beneath her arm. And behind the house, near the bend in the creek, where fire once threatened and seed once scattered, the garden bloomed. Lavender reached for the sun, brushing the porch railings. Daisies curled between the stones. Forget-me-nots stretched toward the well as if they remembered every hand that fed them. The wildflower beds had no order, no fence, no lines. But they grew anyway, reckless, beautiful, free. Reed stood on the porch most mornings, watching the sunrise spill across the fields. The ranch breathed quietly beneath the light, steady, alive. At the top of the ridge, they dismounted in silence. Below, the land stretched wide and golden, soft with growing things. Reed glanced at Clara, not the view. This time, it wasn't the scenery he came for. Reed cleared his throat. You said something once, about how flowers can grow on stone if they get enough water. Clara nodded, arms crossed, wind pulling loose strands from her braid. He reached into his coat and pulled something small, leather, weathered, darkened with age. I don't have a ring, he said. Never figured I'd need one. But this, he opened his palm, a bridle strap, old, smooth from years of handling, a single letter burned into the corner, R. It was the first thing I ever carved with my brother. Used it every season since. He paused, watching her closely. It held every wild horse I ever trusted, and every memory I was too scared to let go of. Clara didn't move, didn't breathe. I'm not asking for a promise, Reed said, just offering something that stayed with me when nothing else did. I want you to have it, not because I want to keep you, he swallowed hard, but because I finally believe you chose to stay. Her fingers hovered, then slowly curled around the strap. She rarely cried, but her voice cracked just a little when she said, You didn't try to tame me. Reed met her eyes. You're not something to tame. You walked beside me. That's the only way I want it, he replied. She looped the strap around her wrist, the leather soft against skin hardened by fire, by cold, by years of running. And there, under the wind and the wildflowers, Clara Vale finally stood still. No vows, no preacher, just quiet belonging. Out here in the West, love never looked like fairy tales. It looked like two calloused hands meeting across firelight, like wildflowers blooming in stone, like a woman who refused to bow and a man who never asked her to. Clara and Reed's story isn't just about the past, it's about us today. Because how many of us are still learning what it means to stand beside someone instead of trying to fix them? How many still carry the weight of old losses, afraid to plant anything new in the scorched places of our hearts? Clara taught us that you don't need permission to grow, just a little dirt that doesn't spit you out. And Reed showed us that strength isn't found in raising your voice, but in knowing when to listen. Maybe you've lived long enough to know love isn't about grand declarations. Maybe like them, you've come to believe that the most lasting things are built in quiet moments, in hard work, in staying when it's easier to leave. But what do you think? Was Clara brave to stay? Was Reed wise to wait? Do you think love can truly grow in places broken by fire? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. If this story touched your heart, reminding you of someone you lost, someone you found, or someone you're still waiting for, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with those who still believe in slow, steady love. Because here at Wild West Love Stories, we believe some hearts aren't meant to be tamed, but chosen. And maybe yours is one of them. And if you rode past Wildflower Hollow on any Sunday morning, you might hear June's laughter echoing from the porch, braids swinging, books in hand. Not a guest, not a burden, just another root, finally finding soil soft enough to grow.